What's up, everybody? It's Kayata again with Crypto Jam, and today we'll do module 2, which is business with the blockchain and how they can benefit from the blockchain. So let's go.
In the next section, we're going to drill down and look at why is blockchain relevant for business, and we're going to do this effectively by walking through 4 use cases and talking about a few concepts around those use cases. But first of all, let's look at the benefits for putting blockchain into a transaction processing system. All of these benefits are real and also very, very tangible. And for example, the first one is that blockchain application saves time. Transactions can be transformed to something that can take a number of days to almost real time. And for certain transaction types, this becomes very important. Things like a letter of credit can actually take days to get through, and these can be made pretty much instantaneous through blockchain, revolutionizing the business network. As I mentioned earlier, by involving the internal and external auditor in the business network, we can slash internal and external auditing costs basically at a stroke. So overheads and cost intermediaries can actually be taken out, and the whole business network can be made more efficient by removing costs. We said earlier, when we looked at how the network was before blockchain, that there was the risk of tampering and vulnerability in there. But effectively, because the ledger's distributed and we're using privacy services to lock together the elements of the blockchain, we reduce risk within the business network of tampering, fraud, or cybercrime. Again, some excellent papers that have been written on that already. So in your speaker notes, and I'll show you a little bit further through in the IBM blockchain community, there's lots of useful details if you want to find out more about this concept of reducing cybercrime with blockchain in business networks. And through all of these things, and also through this, the concepts that I've introduced earlier, we have a net improvement of trust within the business network, effectively because everyone uses the same way to keep their ledgers updated, to keep their business processes flowing. This can actually increase the trust within the business network.
Good so far.
So let's look at that in 4 use cases. This is the first of those 4 use cases, and it's around having a shared set of reference data. Now, the example that we've put in here are the concepts of bank routing codes. In the UK, there are 6 numbers that decide where your bank payment gets routed, and there are unique identifiers for the destination bank. This is an example of shared reference data, but it could be anything. Different business networks can have different examples of reference data. This could be something like a job card or an employment record. But in this instance, we're using routing codes as an example. And effectively, right now, all the different members of the business network will keep their own copy of the reference data, and that will be updated according to some maybe email or possibly paper trail that's used to update that information when it changes. By putting all the information on blockchain, we can actually control who can change the data and who can actually get access to the data once it's been changed. Hence making the whole thing much more reliable, much more online, much more real time. And when you've got a business network that maybe spreads across different industries, across different countries, across different regulatory boundaries, this can be a very, very efficient way of actually managing reference data. The benefits that we see accrued on the right-hand side, effectively reducing errors, improving real-time access to the critical data, and supporting natural workflows around creation, modification, and deletion of the elements of the reference data. So a very powerful use case might seem relatively straightforward, but indeed it is. It's quite a good one for organisations to start with, or business networks to start with. And we've talked about variations of this use case with many different customers up to now.
Supply chain.
The second one I'll give is probably the number one cross-industry use case for blockchain. That's the supply chain.
One chain.
And we're showing here the concept of putting the complex tree of parts for an aircraft onto a blockchain, and using the blockchain to record when things change in the assembly or disassembly of that tree of parts. And we can record things like all the manufacturing data, where the elements, where the part or the subsystem has been in its journey from manufacture all the way through to integration into the final aircraft. And we can even keep things down to which the individual computer-aided machine programming module that was used to create the part, if that's relevant. So we've got this way of actually maintaining throughout the life cycle of an asset who's done what to the asset over time. Although this is the example around complex system systems like a modern aircraft, there are some really interesting use cases. And
like if you know VChain using RFIDs integrated with the blockchain to track like stuff like Louis bags or like food and many other stuff to differentiate between fraud and the real version. Asia definitely needs stuff like this because a lot of fake stuff come from China.
Public references that we've got around supply chain. For example, the Everledger Corporation has actually worked with IBM to basically render a mining to diamond retailing supply chain onto the blockchain. And they do that to prevent their supply chain pollution. So that means that they can make sure that there are no false diamonds or synthetic diamonds or blood diamonds or anything like that get into the supply chain. So effectively the retailer can be sure of the complete audit trail or provenance of the diamond that they're buying, and hence increasing the net value of that diamond through the improvement of trust. There are examples of supply chain use cases across manufacturing industry, across all types of different industries, and as I say, I think this is probably the most common cross-industry use case. The advantages are clear. The trust goes up because you know who's done what to each asset as it goes through its life cycle. We know who's owned each asset, where it's been in geographical terms, and hence the whole supply chain becomes much more efficient in terms of keeping track of who's owned what. Coming back finally to this concept of using blockchain in the supply chain to maintain a complex system of records, we can be very specific. If something goes wrong with an aircraft, maybe there's a maintenance incident or something similar, we can be very specific in diagnosing that incident and finding which subsystems and which parts were actually were constituted part of the maintenance event, rather than do a whole cross-fleet analysis or cross-fleet recall in the case of failure. So this can reduce costs from those terms as well. My third use case of 4 is, the example here is audit and compliance. And I'll actually mention here a project that I was personally involved in with ABN AMRO, who are a big Dutch bank. They actually put their property portfolio onto blockchain to improve the audit and compliance of that property portfolio, which needed constant valuation through the life cycle of the property. There are a number of members in the business network involved in that valuation. Clearly the bank wanted to know, the property owners wanted to know, the people who were doing the valuation clearly had a key input in there. But effectively, by pulling all this information onto a blockchain, they could have a complete trusted view of their property portfolio. this could actually encourage the people in the bank to be more proactive about how they would manage that portfolio, and also to have an up-to-date view of risk. That they had a good degree of surety in, because they knew that everything was locked together and there was a complete trail of what had been done, and all that was recorded on the blockchain. So that's one example, but there are a number of other examples of people effectively recording information for audit and compliance reasons on the blockchain. Not just a financial industry use case, it can actually be used in a number of different ways in blockchain, but it's really very, very powerful if it's used in the correct way. And the final one on here is letters of credit. Letters of credit, if you actually, anyone who's been looked at them, they're fundamental to the way that buying and selling occurs cross-border, and they're quite a complex set of up to 27 different individual documents that are exchanged and signed by the counterparty banks who represent the buyer and seller in the business network. They've been around for ages. A colleague of mine told me that they were actually developed sometime back in history, but effectively it's another example of why where we've actually been taking a business process and incrementally digitizing it. That's right, it was the Knights Templar. I forgot that for a moment. But effectively, Knights Templar, going back many, many different centuries, were the ones who originally invented the concept of a letter of credit. And we could clearly go back and Google that if we want. But effectively, blockchain gives a way of combining letters of credit and actually making them work in a much smarter way. We can replace the concept of getting the letters signed by the different counterparties with something that's much more online and up to date. And we can even couple the concept of letters of credit with Internet of Things devices, where, for example, we could tell that a pallet of goods has actually crossed through an RFID sensor into a warehouse, and so we could then allow the seller to draw down a certain percentage of the letter of credit, because we had surety through this RFID event that the goods had actually made it part of the way to the end customer. So again, a very, very powerful use case. The benefits really drawing down the times of execution to almost real time. We put less than a day to be on the conservative side there, vastly reducing costs, also vastly reducing risk for both the seller, the buyer, and the correspondent banks who were involved in the process. So again, something very powerful and also very similar to a number of other cross-border import and export systems that we've been doing with blockchain that we'll come and look at later.
So definitely what I see from this so far, like all these companies out here that implement blockchain definitely increase the value of their stock. We already know Alibaba use them. If you Google IBM and Maersk, huge manufacturing company, they deal with large shipments, so that's Maersk. You can Google them and see that IBM and them have partnered and they're using Stellar.
So there are examples of these blockchain use cases really bubbling up in all the industries. The finance industry were without a doubt the early adopters of blockchain technology. A lot of the banks saw blockchain as both a threat and an opportunity to their business.
Bank of America.
And started with a number of early experimentations. But we've actually seen all of the different industries embrace blockchain to some degree or other and start to look for really the positive, compelling use cases within their industry. And a lot of the time our team gets involved in talking to either end customers or talking to the IBM account teams or industry teams about what constitutes a good blockchain use case. And we effectively come back to these four powerful words of consensus, provenance, immutability, and finality. Those are really key, but the fundamental one is whether a business network exists. So if a business network doesn't exist, the chances are it's not a good blockchain use case. You could really render it with something that's much more traditional technology like distributed database. However, if a business network exists, we then go and look at these 4 test words to see whether it's a good blockchain use case. And we've actually found really good use cases across the different industries. As I say, finance was the guys who were in there first. The public sector guys found a number of very powerful use cases, very compelling to governments to effectively reduce bureaucracy while increasing trust on the government-citizen transaction. So lots of very powerful use cases in there. The retail organizations also saw a number of different use cases on things like loyalty programs. Supply chains are clearly very key to the retail industry. And insurance, again, you know, the whole concept of claims processing, particularly for complex insurance instruments involving multiple parties, lots of benefit from putting those onto a blockchain. And finally, manufacturing, last but not least, again, lots of complicated manufacturing processes and supply chains which can get great benefit from actually embracing blockchain technologies. So, as I say, there are artifacts that are coming up from the IBM industries who are looking at embracing blockchain. Many of these are on the blockchain community that I'm going to be pointing you at towards the end of the presentation.
So that's a key thing, especially now. Imagine in insurance industry, and where multiple parties are involved. You can update with blockchain. You can update information all at the same time and know that it's trustworthy and all verified and all accurate, especially with smart contract integrated, and that can definitely cut down the time and also the cost. So yeah, almost done.
We're very, very passionate and very, very enthusiastic about blockchain, but we also must be very cognizant that it still is an emerging technology. Just to give you some concrete numbers around this, last year we did some 85 projects with customers worldwide. This year, in Q1, we've done some 45, almost 50 projects with customers worldwide. So it gives you an indication we're really getting started. We're in the foothills of this blockchain journey. And it's really, another thing that our team gets involved in is actually helping people find a good blockchain first project use case. Now we encourage our customers and our IBM colleagues not to try and boil the ocean, not to go for the big, high-powered, high-fluted use case first, really to look for somewhere that they can start small, improve their awareness in blockchain technologies, and then grow very quickly as they actually learn and adopt. And we've actually put together a hierarchy of different use cases. So it's much easier to start with something on the compliance ledger and work your way up the stack than really trying to start higher. We sometimes get involved if customers are very, very, very passionate about quite complicated use cases. We then work with them to try and find a corner of that use case where they could actually get started. But very much keeping right to the front of our mind that we need to help the customer go through this awareness journey to really understand what things like smart contracts can do with them, can do in their business, and how they can actually engender better operations across their business networks using blockchain technologies. We've also noticed, while we've been on the blockchain journey, we've noticed some different types of players in the business network. Most of the companies we talked to last year were individual organizations who were saying, hey, this blockchain technology could be good for us if we use it with core members of our business network. So effectively sponsored by individual organizations and working outwards. But this year, already, we've actually talked to a number of different cross-industry organizations or within industry organizations of multiple companies who want to take on board blockchain and use it to make their small business network or maybe large business network more efficient. And we also see within these business networks different roles for the different parties involved. So clearly the regulator could be a national bank in the case of a financial use case for blockchain, could be sponsoring the growth of the network. A lot of the national banks are experimenting with the use of blockchain technologies for a number of different things, so they could get the project started. Industry groups. I was talking to an industry group just a couple of weeks ago in the UK who are interested in having a shared common process across their industry to make things more efficient. In this case, the concept of maintaining or building particular large complex things. Or indeed, the initiative could be actually started by a market maker, someone who actually wants to really try and push forward the way that the organisation works and the way that a business network works to create new goods and services and to create new value within existing business networks. So we can start with any of these or any combination. And as I say, we've noticed the trend through this year of working with more business networks and while continuing, obviously, to work with individual customers to increase their awareness. So that takes me to the end of the second section. In the final section, I'm going to go and talk about for a few minutes about how IBM's getting involved in blockchain and how IBM is looking to apply blockchain technologies to improve how our customers work.
So that's it for Module 2. We're going to do the graded review question and see if it was paying attention. Alright, so the question is, what is the primary benefit of immutability? So, immutability, tamper-proof, scalability, increased efficiency, improved security. I'm right now stuck in tamper-proof or improved security. I'd say tamper-proof. Let's go with that. Check, and it's correct. You know, we're smart over here. We're smart. Okay, so that's it for Module 2. Stay tuned for Module 3, and thank you for watching. And have a good, hump day.